Have you ever just stood in the middle of a city and wondered, why? Why are there towering skyscrapers here, but just a few miles away it's all sprawling suburbs? Well, it's not random. Not at all. There's actually a hidden logic at play, and today we're going to pull back that curtain and decode the blueprint of our cities.
So yeah, this is the big mystery, right? How do you get these two complete extremes, the super dense vertical downtown and these spread out horizontal suburbs, often in the exact same metro area? Well, the answer is this fascinating mix of money, rules, and a whole lot of history. Okay, let's get into it. All right, to really get a handle on the big picture, we first need to get a grip on two fundamental building blocks: population density and land use. You can think of these as the basic grammar of any city. They really define how crowded a place is and what people are actually doing there. Okay, first up is population density. And this is a pretty straightforward concept. It's basically just the official way of asking how packed in is everybody. A super high-density area has tons of people crammed into a small space, while a low-density area, well, that's where everyone gets a lot more room to breathe. And then you've got land use. This is simply the designated job for any given piece of land. Is it for living in? That's residential. Is it for businesses and shopping? We call that commercial. Or is it for making stuff? That's manufacturing. These categories are pretty much the primary way a city keeps itself organized.
So now that we've got the basics down, let's talk about the single most powerful force that shapes our cities: economics. I mean, at its heart, the layout of a city is just this fierce competition for space. And you know what? Money is the ultimate referee. And it all boils down to one surprisingly simple factor: the cost of the land itself. I mean, think about it. The decision to build a tiny little corner store versus a massive skyscraper on the exact same plot of land is almost entirely driven by the price tag on that piece of ground. It is the fundamental economic starting point for everything.
You know, economists actually have a name for this whole phenomenon. It's called bid-rent theory. And it's a simple but really powerful idea. Basically, the closer you get to the city center, what we call the Central Business District, or CBD, the more crazy valuable and in demand that land becomes. And the businesses that absolutely need that prime location, they will pay top dollar for it.
And this shows you exactly how that works. Right there in the center, the land value is through the roof. This is where big commercial players, think banks, corporate headquarters, can afford to set up shop. They literally outbid everyone else. But as you move away from that center, the price starts to drop, and that's where residential buildings and eventually single-family homes can finally start to compete for space. But, you know, it's not a complete free-for-all just decided by whoever has the deepest pockets. Cities have an official rule book that directs all this growth, and it shapes neighborhoods with a very intentional hand. So let's take a look at the rules of the game.
And these rules are called zoning regulations. They're just local laws that tell you exactly what you can build and where you can build it. Zoning is the reason you don't have a noisy, smelly factory popping up right next to an elementary school. It separates the city into these different functional zones. Now, what's really fascinating is how zoning creates these totally distinct patterns of living. Low-density zones, they give us the classic suburbs with single-family homes, but they pretty much require everyone to own a car. High-density zones, on the other hand, give us those apartment towers right in the city core, which are perfect for public transit. And then there's that medium-density sweet spot with townhouses and duplexes, which often creates a nice, walkable middle ground. So we've got economics, and we've got rules. But to get the full story, we really have to dig into the past, because the way our cities are built today is so deeply influenced by the technologies and the social forces of yesterday. Oh yeah, technology has completely reshaped the city. I mean, originally, cities had to be super compact because everyone had to walk everywhere. Then came the electric streetcar, which allowed cities to stretch outward along its lines. But then the automobile and the highway system, that just blew the doors wide open, creating massive sprawl. And finally, the invention of steel-framed construction and the elevator allowed cities to grow up, not just out.
But there's another, much more complex layer to all this. The physical layout of our cities is also, in a way, a map of our social history. It reflects these deep-seated divisions of class and race that were written directly into the landscape.
A major example of this in American history is the phenomenon known as white flight. In the post-World War II era, there was this massive demographic shift where huge numbers of white residents moved out of the dense, diverse city centers and into newly forming suburbs. Now, it's really crucial to understand this wasn't just a random migration. It wasn't just people deciding they wanted a backyard. It was actively engineered.
First, you have the new highway system that made it possible to live way outside the city. But it was also enforced by discriminatory policies like restrictive covenants. These were actual legal agreements written into property deeds that explicitly banned people of color from buying homes in these new suburban neighborhoods. The result was the creation of a deeply divided landscape, a pattern of racial and economic segregation whose lines are, frankly, still visible in many American cities today.
So after decades of all these historical forces shaping our cities, how are we adapting today? Well, many cities are now actively trying to solve the problems of sprawl and segregation by completely rethinking how they use the land they already have. This isn't about expanding anymore, it's about building smarter. And the key strategy that everyone's talking about today is called infilling. So instead of continuing to build outward, which really strains our infrastructure and the environment, the idea is to build inward. This means strategically developing vacant lots or old industrial sites or just underused land that's already inside the city's borders to increase density in a more responsible way.
Seattle is a perfect real-world example of this. As its tech sector just exploded, the city faced this massive housing crunch. So, instead of just sprawling further and further out, they made a deliberate choice to change their zoning rules. They started allowing for taller, denser residential buildings on land that was previously underutilized, and that helped house a whole new wave of workers much closer to where they actually work.
So why does any of this actually matter to you? Well, because these decisions directly affect your daily life. Low-density suburbs, they often mean higher taxes for each household to pay for all those miles of roads and pipes. High-density city centers make great public transit possible, which is awesome, but they can also drive up housing costs. It's all a series of trade-offs that ends up shaping your commute, your wallet, and your entire community.
Every single street, every neighborhood, every skyline tells a story of economics, of rules, and of history. The story of your city has been written by these exact same forces. So the real question now is, what do you want its next chapter to look like?